let's see if I can explain a little bit about how a Sporlan Sorit valve works. These are typically installed in racks or any other application to where you need a precise control on your evaporator pressure. On a rack, they're typically mounted in a header. On a header like this, your suction line comes in from the case at the top, your header's at the bottom. So the way this valve works, you have 5 pressure points. You have your suction pressure, just tap. Also, I can fall over if you hit the right one. But you have your suction pressure. You have the adjustment spring. You have your high pressure feed from your hot gas. You have your outlet pressure. And, excuse me, no, that don't actually count. You have what I'm gonna call the intermediate pressure in between the adjustment and the piston. And then you got a spring underneath the piston. Let's see, here's the piston. It sits in a sleeve inside. Okay, and there's your spring that's in the bottom of it. I'll show you more on that in a minute. Anyway, how this valve works is, of course, the pressure setting has to be above what the suction header pressure setting is. You can't set this below the suction header pressure because physics. It won't happen. Whatever you're running, evaporator you're running on this side will run whatever the pressure is on the suction header. So that is one thing when you're checking these, and we'll get into it in a minute. You got to make sure you know what your suction header pressure is, because it can fool you. So anyway, what happens here is your suction pressure coming in on the evaporator side comes in and pushes up on a spring in here that you're adjusting for your set point. As it pushes up on that spring, the pressure is getting high. It closes off a needle valve in here that allows any pressure in this intermediate area to dump out into the suction header. As this pressure drops, so when it does that, of course, your spring on the bottom pushes that piston up. Well, as this pressure drops, that spring starts to push back down. It opens up that seat in here and allows high pressure to get on top of that piston. It pushes the piston down and pushes the valve closed to make that pressure rise. Now, as things are running, things will settle out. That thing will kind of sit in the middle. It'll move up, move down, move up, move down a little bit. And when you take one apart that's been used, sometimes you can actually see the spot where that thing's been hanging most of the time. But the way it closes and what happens when you go into defrost, you de-energize this coil up here. It actually opens a bypass between here and the top of that piston, and it pushes that piston closed. So as long as this pressure is lower than this pressure, that piston will stay shut. So take it apart. Of course, you'll have a service valve here coming off your header, your hot gas header. You'll cut it off. Actually, let's go into the little diagnostics first. So say you've got one that's sticking closed. All right, you have it energized, but it's sticking closed. What I will do is, typically there's a service valve here. I wish I had one handy, but I didn't think about it. You have a service valve here. You close that service valve and then crack the nut on the bottom. When you crack the nut, it releases the pressure that's on this piston back here. So if it's actually a problem with this part, the solenoid actually activating the operation of the valve, when you crack that nut and relieve the pressure, this piston will open up, the pressure will start to drop. If you do that and it doesn't open, then it's just stuck. Where that kind of comes into play is if you relieve this and it opens fine, you can get away with just changing this part of the valve. This is a KY1, yeah, it's a KY1000. I think, is it 5? It says 9. Oh, it does say 5. Let me look at it clear. But the KY1005, that is the pilot assembly. If you relieve the pressure here, the valve opens and you drop your suction pressure drops here, you can get away with just changing the pilot assembly. Me personally, if I find there is a problem with the valve, typically I change the valve and put a new piston assembly in it, internal parts, just simply because you've got valve part anyway. So a little bit more about how it works. Take this off. All right. Oh, one note too: if you're using a box end wrench, it's 7/16, but if you're using a box end wrench on that bolt and that bolt, be careful how much you loosen it with your box end wrench, because you can get it hung up in there. So, I've done it way too many times. Now, when you take one apart, whoops. Now they do, some of the older one of these are the old, we call them old Sporlan pink valves. They look similar to this, but a lot of times it's really difficult to get the bolts out of them. It's about just easier to change the whole valve body and everything out. So I need to get my camera started. One thing at a time. So you're not going to get that nut out. It's just not going to come out until you can turn the pilot assembly, which once everything's loose, you can actually turn it and get it, moved around a little bit. But okay, so now once you got the 4 bolts out, which I've lost 2 of them already, it's about typical. They're down here somewhere. Anyway, once you get the bolts out, you can take, oh, by the way, the first thing you do before you do any of this, make sure you pump the circuit down. But this is the pilot assembly. Now, if you're changing it, what you'll have to do, there's another one. Anyway, what you'll have to do is you'll have to take this part off of the pilot assembly itself. It's kind of a pain in the butt, but the pilot assembly actually screws into it. I have used channel locks. What I try to do is bite it down in here. That way you're not messing up where the gasket seats. You'll bite it down in here, and then just a big adjustable on the assembly itself. It'll come apart. One thing too is those are machined threads. There's no gasket, no sealant, nothing needed. You just screw it together and tighten the hell out of it. There's some specs, but I don't know them off the top of my head. Anyway, so as I was saying, so we set this like that. Let's see. That'll work for now. Well, there's a wheel, there's a way. Oh, when you're changing these, always make sure you put the screen back in. I've dropped many of them, you end up with a leak right there and you can't figure out why. So anyhow, we're energized. Suction pressure comes in, it's higher than the evaporator pressure. So it closes off and basically the pistons moves up to the top. Okay? Well, now as this pressure drops, the spring starts pushing down and it closes off the high pressure that's coming in here, which ends up getting bled off to the suction, and it starts pushing that valve in. All right, well then as the pressure rises, it comes back up again. Okay, let's see. I know what I need. I had them here a minute ago. Oh, there they are. Okay. Come here for using these on a new valve, it'll be okay. But, whoops. Oh, see? And it seats. You can't see. I'll try to take a picture. I wonder if I turn the flash on. Nope. Ah, there we go. Look there. See? And that plastic ring, Teflon, seats against that down in there. Closes the valve off. Now, since we're talking about servicing this, there's a really cool trick to getting this out right here. And I don't have the right one, I don't think. No. These things, get you a little bitty one of these. And you can get it in actually behind the lip in there and real gently push against the seal. And I haven't yet to crack a seal or mess a seal up, and it'll push that ring right out. Or I've seen people use like reverse type I guess bearing pullers. I mean, they make different other pullers. Actually, it wouldn't be bad just to make something anyway. But always change that outside the sleeve, because that helps you. If it gets wore out or gets a groove in it, you're changing it with a new piston, and you save yourself a lot of aggravation later on. Oops. You know what helps too? Putting it back together right. So we have gasket. Yep, gasket. Now successfully rebuilt your valve. Trust me, this is a lot easier by yourself when you're not holding the camera and the valve's on the rack. You hook it back up and test it. But I hope that explains a little bit more about what's going on and helps your diagnosis of a Sporlan EPR valve. Have a great day.